Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us at Venture Cafe for another virtual artist talk in studio tour. Tonight, I'm very excited to present the work of French artist Agathe Bouton, who is currently living and working in Philadelphia. Agathe creates works that are primarily on paper and use printmaking techniques, which are influenced by her travels from all over the world. She received her BFA and MFA in Paris from the ESSAA du Paris in Paris, and she left about 15 years ago to begin her travels. Agathe has exhibited her work all over the world, including in London, Myanmar, Senegal, the Ivory Coast, Australia, and Turkey. She has received numerous awards in France and the United States, including the Pierre Lauren First Prize, and her work is included in many permanent collections in French institutions, as well as in the United States, including the Free Library of Philadelphia. So now I would like to give a warm welcome to Agathe. How are you doing?
Thank you, Angela. Thank you for this very nice introduction. And thank you for everyone who comes tonight. So what I will do, I will do a short presentation of myself. And after we will do a virtual tour of my studio. So I prepared a slideshow. So I will share my screen right now. Perfect. Here we are. Perfect. So yes, as Angela said, I moved to the US. It's 6 years now, a little bit of more than 6 years. I mostly came because of my husband's work, and I had the privilege, I would say the great chance to travel, and I left Europe exactly 17 years ago now, and moved first to London. My husband is British, and he had a position in England. So from France, we moved to London, and then after to different countries. So I studied fine art and painting in an art school in Paris, as Angela said. And I have a degree in fine art and painting and in textile design. So I started my career as a textile designer. And I was working, first of all, in fashion and after home interior design, until after a few years of full-time job, I was getting extremely frustrated to not have time on the side to work for my own artwork. So I decided to go back to school, evening classes. I had the opportunity to go back to my old school and took some printmaking lesson. I was approached to printmaking during my studies, but was never really appealed by it. It's not that I didn't like it, but I guess as a student, sometime in your curriculum, you go to a studio to another, you don't spend a lot of time to really get to know the technique. So I knew about it, but never really worked about it. And because after I pursue my studies into textile design, I was much more oriented into textiles and to basically fine art. But I really wanted to go back to my first love, which was, and my passion for art. And so I took back some evening classes. And so that's a slide of the small studio where I used to go, and with some two fellow artist friends. And I really fell in love of printmaking. So when I say printmaking, during those classes, I was mostly learning about the most traditional printmaking way, which is intaglio and etching work, and also relief print. I went through the screen printing and the lithography, but really let that a bit on the side. I was much more interested into the etching process. And then, it's a bit of a retrospective. I show you some work from, I would say, a beginning until I arrive here in the US, and we will go through different stages of my work and series of work. So here is just some photos to show you a bit. I don't know if some of you are aware of printmaking and how it works. So you have on the left photos explaining a bit the process of etching and intaglio. It's working on a plate that you engrave with different tools. It can be acid or it can be dry point. And all the work goes under heavy press, will basically print what you've got on the plate onto a white paper. So it's a very quick explanation because there's so much to say about the technique. And on the right, you have what I was doing at that time. I was working small. At that time, I had no studio. I was living in a small apartment. So I was using that share a printmaking studio in my old school. And when it's a shared studio, you know, you don't have space for big, large work. So I was working fairly small. And as you can see, already in the work, it's not black and white. I never use the traditional way of printing in black and white. I wasn't interested in black and white and in reproduction. So sometimes when you think printmaking, it's black and white, it's quite graphic. It can be, but you know, the way you taught it in Europe is definitely quite traditional. And me, I was much more interested by what's the technique, how I could work with different techniques and do my own little cooking, I would say, onto the plate to basically make bridges between printing and painting. Because I'm definitely more, I would say, I have a kind of a spirit in painting, but I don't know how I can explain it, but I'm painting, I would say, with the technique of printmaking and on paper. It's the way it works. And this is my studio in Paris. So I had a great chance to have a studio. I was living, I don't know if you can see, in the background, in the ground floor of that building. That building was built by the City of Paris. The City of Paris has an art department when they put some money on the side to build specific building for artists to live and work in the same space with a very low rent. So it's great. And I was really pleased to have that opportunity to have, you know, my own space. And because I was in a sculpture studio, it was perfect to be able to have a etching press, and it was full of light. So that was great, because as soon as I had that studio, I decided to quit, you know, those evening classes. It's not that I was still learning things, but I was just going to be able to share the studio space. But as soon as I had that big studio and I bought a press, I was able to work in my studio and have the possibility to be alone and to work much bigger. So the first, I would say, after I pursue my press, the first series of work that really inspired me, and I was still living in Paris, was those, and I'm sure, and I know, I saw that in Philadelphia, you've got those a remaining wall when you demolish a block of buildings. We call it héberge in French, but I think it's the same word in English. It's héberge. It's not a very common name. And I was really inspired by the fact that you have remaining pieces of wallpaper or tiles, you know, details of an inside of an apartment. And I was really interested by the graphic composition it was doing. And I started that series called Héberge, first of all, kind of monochromatic. And here, instead of engraving that plate of copper or dang, I was working on plexiglass sheet and with carbon technique. So the carbon technique, it's a superstructure that you're applying onto the plate. And it's a bit like working like a bas-relief onto the plate. So it's something more contemporary. It's definitely a contemporary approach to printmaking. And again, I was working with that technique because working with the texture was allowing me to, again, make those bridges between print and painting. So here it's basically, there's, just to be a little bit more technical, they have a first coat of sepia ink for the base of the plate. And after I was applying different viscosity and a harness of roller of brayer on top of the plate to have those transparency of color on top. So I was really playing with that, mostly playing with the ink. And you will see in the next slide that after I was applying collages like sheen collé, which is a way of, between the plate and the phenol paper, you're applying some extra collages of paper to add extra structure, extra colors to the plate. So that was really fun. I really love working this way. And I worked on that series maybe for 5 years, and I was always coming back to it with new plates and new idea. What I love the most and what I do the most with those plates, it's working on the plate itself. I don't do a big series of plates. I have maybe 5 of them. But what I like, it's every time I'm working on the plate, it's giving a new atmosphere of color. And just by changing the color of the plate, I've got every time a new print. I've got something new. Again, I'm not into reproduction. Some people would love to have the same plate and do a reproduction of 50 of the same. Me, what I like the most is it's just playing with it. So it's like being in front of a pair of canvases and each time redoing the same still life, but with different light, different color, etc., etc. So that's a photo of inside of that studio you saw earlier, of my studio. It's only one piece of the wall. It was, I think, something I've done for Open Studio a long time ago. And after the Eber series, the building series, I can say the wall series, I was really into landscape. So again, it's the same technique of work. It's different plates, but again, with the same plate, like we can see in the middle one, in the horizontal one here, that both are identical plates, but by the way I apply the ink and the Shinkole, I've got 2 different atmospheres. And this is what really drive me into that work. It was really playing with the collages and the ink. And we see more here. And the whole series is mostly inspired by seascape, by the fact that sometimes we don't see the sky is melting, I would say, with the water, with the remaining water when when it's low tide, and working on different atmosphere of the day. There's another one. So here is the same plate, but again, because I apply different collages, it gives another atmosphere. So sometimes it's summertime, sometimes it's more winter time, and early night in the morning. And after a while, I thought, you know what? As a printmaker, you print a lot, and you always have remaining paper on the side that you keep because you like them, or you don't necessarily feel to put them in the trash. And I decided to start to work in 3 dimensions. And I made some paper clothes here. Paper clothes. The thing is, so, you know, I have a lot of series of work. So I try to synthesize for tonight, but feel free to, later on, I will give you the link for my website and go to my website. There's much more work to see. I was at early stage working on writing. And I was really inspired by a writing pad from the cuneiform, for the first pads. You could see the terracotta plates you could see with the first writing. And I was linking that with also African textile pattern, were quite graphic, and embroidery from Central Africa. So I used those plates as monotype, and I've done plenty of print onto silk paper or just newsprint, and I made clothes with it. And that was basically for a purpose of a big installation print for a show in Paris. And during my studies, I was really privileged to have a trip in Japan, a study trip in Japan, and I was fascinated with the country. And one of the things that struck me the most was those wishes trees that you found at the entrance of every temple in Japan. And so those little pieces of paper here is my own interpretation of those trees. And coming after that, coming after that, I decided to make some books. So I've got some modular books, accordion books, and I quite like to finish a story with a tiny book. I think it's like it's a nice summary of the series. So I sometimes force myself to do it. It's a great exercise. It's a nice challenge. And I came to do books because I had a curator who came to me after that big installation print to say, are you doing books? And I didn't say yes or no. I say, sure. And I just produce a lot of books and use my prints to do some books. So it's not necessarily books with proper writing that you can read, but it's a kind of a mix between sculpture and books. And again, it was really nice to do it. And for this one, I was coming back to the first print I was doing maybe 5 years before with working on the alphabet. And here is the Hebrew alphabet. I don't read Hebrew at all. I can't speak Hebrew, but I came across the alphabet when I was doing research about different alphabets, and one of the older alphabet. And I really like the fact of those letters create some big sign. It's quite graphic and abstract at the same time. And here it's a mixed between old papers and old paint and prints. There's a lot of superposition in my work. I will love working on superposition. It gives great texture to the work and depth to the work too. And you will see later on, I recycling a lot. I love recycling. So here, I guess it was a kind of old newspaper from an exhibition museum somewhere in Paris. I don't remember which one, but I'm recycling a lot. And I like because it's creating already, you have something on the paper and it's adding, you know, something graphic to your composition. And because I've got that degree in textile design, I'm still, you know, I was juggling between printing and textiles. So at the same time, I was also working with textile. And here again, it's a curator who came to me to ask if I could do a textile invitation for a museum in Paris, and it was for a specific show. And I thought the high was extremely high. It was I don't know in inches in feet, but it was extremely high. And I decided to just buy some old bed sheets in flea markets and make a connection between my prints that you can see in the bottom right, which is the outside of a building, and the fabrics is the inside of the building. So it's a bit our cocoon, and we've got the still succession of witch's tree here. So it's all about fabrics here and things that I collect and sew together. There's not a lot of paint. I was trying to just collect in the same range of color. And we will see on the next slide, I came with something different here, which is some fabrics that I dye and I paint on some of them. And it's another interpretation of here. I left, I would say, the Asian interpretation. I went more across the nomadic tribe from Middle East and from Syria and Palestine, who usually decorate their tent with carpets and with big pieces of fabrics to warm up the old tent inside. And so it's all inspired by that. And the funny thing is, it's at that time I never went into those countries, but later on I had the opportunity to visit them. So that was really nice. And suddenly I moved to London. So big change from Paris. I know it's too close country. We've got the Eurostar only in 2 hours, so it's quite close, you know, but so different from Paris, so different. And I came there, I was a new mother with a baby boy, so my life was all changed. And I came to London and I chose the Tate Modern. I don't know if some of you know the Tate Modern. It's a contemporary art museum in London. And I showed that building because that's what inspired the most when I moved to London. I was living not far from the museum, South Bank of London. And at the time, London, the city itself, was bursting into energy and new construction. As there was some construction site everywhere and a big renovation in the area. You used to be quite industrial, but because of the Tate Moderns, there was a lot of development going on. And that definitely inspired me. And here I'm totally different in the way I'm printing. I left the earth tone colors, the landscape, and I went into something much more graphic and very flat. And it's monotype. And it's a technique which I developed later when I moved here in Philadelphia. And it's mostly red because I found the energy so vibrant in London that I thought, you know, for me, it needs to be bright. It needs to be share. Not share. I see share on my screen, so I see red. And I don't have a lot of photos to show you. Again, you can go and see on my website. At that time, I was just starting with digital cameras. So, you know, again, you know, I started nearly 23 years ago now. So, you know, everything, you know, changed now with technology. So I don't have great photos. It was a successful series too. I didn't make a lot. It wasn't a big series again. You know, a baby boy, a new baby boy, a new mother. You have a lot to do. And then from England, my husband brought all the family with him to his work abroad. And we started, so that was 15 years ago, we started to live a life that I will never expected I will live. So life is full of surprises for sure. And we went to Burma, called Myanmar. Myanmar is the actual name. I quite like it to call it Burma. Sorry, the photo is not from me. I took it from the internet, but it was to show you my inspiration. So when I went to Burma, I left my studio behind. I left everything. So I left my press. I put all my studio in a storage, and I took a small cardboard box just with my engraving chisel tools for wood engraving, for woodcut, thinking maybe I will do something, and just some jar of offset ink. And that was all. So it was a long process to accept that I had to leave my studio. But what I found fascinating in Burma, it was the textile there. The country has a lot of ethnic groups who are well preserved, and those ethnic group of people are still doing their own clothes and weave their own fabrics and dye their own fabrics. And I found that so inspiring. It was a great source of inspiration for my work. And I was so much into that deep red color that when I arrived in the country, I thought, but no, for me, Burma was full of color, but definitely not red, until I met this group of people, which is a Karen tribe who live in the west of the country. And there's a big Karen community in Rangoon. And when I saw those fabrics in black and red and white, definitely inspired me. And I started a series of woodcut print, mixing sometimes fabrics, but inspired of the shape of the Karen tunics and also the color. So it's mostly straps of red and white, and also adding sometimes pieces of fabrics. So you've got me working on the studio, and I came back to my love of clothes and making clothes. So I was printing monotypes of wood plank onto silk paper, and I was stitching them together. So it's what you can see on the right. And then during a trek, I came across that beautiful blue skirt. So it's not this actual skirt, but I was trekking in the northwest of the region of Burma, close to the Laotian border. And there I saw that young lady in a rice field with this amazing blue, deep blue skirt. And this is what inspired that series that I call Burmese Days. And I decided to do big. So that piece is maybe around 36 by 36 inches. And it's my own interpretation of those textiles. Some are more abstract than others. You can see different things. I just explain you that my interpretation, it's because of that skirt, but you can see whatever you want. And I was working on a paper from that region, which is a handmade paper from a bark tree that you can find only in that part of what we call the Shan State, which is northwest of the country, and which is a very soft paper, and you can definitely, it prints, it receives the prints very well. And I was working on adding some stitches on those paper after printing. And then another move, we're going to West Africa. So big change, new continent, new culture, so something totally different. So in Africa and West Africa, I started by Ivory Coast. I won't show you any photos of Ivory Coast because I didn't stay very long, and it was a difficult time at that time for us. There was a civil war when we came, so that wasn't great. So we didn't stay very long, and I had to flew basically to Senegal to protect myself and my family. And I chose to go to Dakar. And in Dakar, I was very impressed by the kind of assemblage of material that people collect to make their own little house. When I say house, it's not really a house. It's more like a shack. You say a shack? Yes. A shack. And it's just to show you the next slide. So I definitely kept the indigo color. Indigo, it's a color and a dye that people use in Southeast Asia, but it's also used in West Africa to dye fabrics. So I was happy to continue with the same range of color, but here I came across more, more into monotypes, and I came across mixing some of the prints with fabrics, and it's my own interpretation of all this assemblage of materials. The series called Indigo, and I was in that one and in others. I was basically using the indigo dye diluted with water as an ink. So what I found extremely challenging, but also exciting and interesting, that in Myanmar and in West Africa, there's no art store. There's no place where to buy nice canvases, brushes, paint. There's definitely nothing. So I had to do with what I could find. And what I could find was going to kind of DIY store and buy some big pen brushes. But most of the things was collecting paper. So I was doing most of my work onto recycling material. But that was great because it was pushing me outside of my comfort zone, and it was pushing me towards something different. And then from West Africa, we moved to Turkey. So Turkey has a part in Europe and a part which is Asia. So it's very interesting. There's a lot of cultural things there. So on that photo, and it's I purposely choose that photo of Istanbul, which is Istanbul during the winter. And I explain why. Usually when you think Istanbul, it's summer, it's bright sun, it's bright color. But here, because I live there, I also saw how it was during the winter. And what inspired me the most in Istanbul was the winter light of Istanbul. I guess I wanted to do something different that everybody else does, usually do. Like Istanbul is always the same kind of landscape and blue sky. I really wanted to do something different. And I really liked the color, the different color tone of gray that you've got on that photo. It might not be the best photo, but it's to explain what we come later. And on the right, you see my studio. So I had a studio in a loft, in an attic. So I couldn't really stand. I could stand right in the middle, but not on the side. So also I was working not too big because I had to work on the table. So I developed a whole series of landscape, mostly landscape inspired by the same spot, which is the European side of Istanbul, where I was living too. I was living on the European side. And here it's mostly paper collage. So I was again still working with recycling paper. And I was here, I left the print on the side. I couldn't print anywhere again with my etching press. But here I used some acrylic pen that I diluted a lot, like it was watercolor. And I use it as a watercolor effect. And I've done a lot of work like that. So again, you can go on my website and see more. And I came back to landscape. I realized when summer visiting England, I went to my storage and I realized I had a pile of prints that I've done, which is sometimes the proof prints that you do when you work on a plate are not necessarily nice to keep. But again, you know, when you're a printmaker, I guess you keep all your paper on the side, knowing maybe one day I will do something with it. And this one wasn't as interested the way it was, but I took some back with me and decided to rework on it with paint and collages. So I applied. So basically the actual print is here. You can see some of the remaining sepia in the middle, that stripe in the middle. And I worked at the bottom with acrylic layers and at the top with collages. And then it's Philadelphia. So Philadelphia, strange-wise, the first things I remember when I moved in Philadelphia, very early on, I had to find a storage unit for our goods were shipped from Istanbul. And I ended up visiting North Philadelphia a lot. And I loved it. It might be surprising, but what I loved the most was the two photos that I got here on the screen. It's all the building left behind, all the industrial part of Philadelphia and the warehouses, the factories, etc. And I think I loved it because it reminded me a bit of some of the big cities in West Africa when you could see the power and the energy in the city before suddenly something happened. and everything would destroy and leave behind. And I guess there's a bit of that here with the industrial story in Philadelphia. And it also reminded me a bit what I was doing in London. So I came across some series. I went again on doing monotype print. Here you've got on the left, a print under the press, just to explain you quickly the process. So that's that idea of monotypes. It's applying thin coat of inks onto plexiglass sheet, and it's using paper as masking paper and to create the composition onto the paper. So after a while, you know how to figure out where to place the paper onto the plate, because you know exactly what will happen. And the whole idea is to working on superposition of prints. So on the right side, you can see a lot of prints, and that will become things like that. So in that series that I call Habitat and Urban Matter, I've got some more abstract composition, like the one on the right, and I call it Reflection on Light, because it's mostly inspired by the reflection of the windows of those warehouses building or the skyscrapers there in Philadelphia to reflect to another building, and it's creating big abstract composition. And then I've got my own interpretation of those warehouses or factories. And I have many of them. So, you know, don't hesitate again to go on the website and look at them. I made a lot of them. And in the middle of all that, what I like to do sometimes is having a break of printmaking. And in 2019, I started that small series called, in French, Vue de la Vitre. So I will say it's view from a window, or view from the window in English. And it's still related to those square little windows that we see in the big wall of windows, those big windows from the warehouses. And there's still some print here. So on the left, you can see a bit of the process. So it's a full monotype print, very monochrome, that I mounted on canvases. And after, on top of it, I'm applying layers of like kind of lavish of acrylic paints. And this is a result on the right. It's not very big, it's 12 by 12, but it's really the idea of a small window. And it gives what I wanted to show or to express with that series. It was the blurry vision we've got sometimes when you look through a window with not totally clean, with stain, with rain or different elements. And so that's, you know, I really love the idea of taking a break. It's refreshing. It gives you also some time to go back again to the series you were doing with another eye, with a fresh eye. And that is one of my latest series called Second Peau, which means second skin in English. And it's a series that I developed recently. It was late 2019 and last year. And it's a series I mostly made because of Stanley Gallery. So I'm an artist member of Stanley Gallery. And a year ago, a little bit more, a year ago, Catherine Stanek from the gallery said that she wanted to develop an exhibition with me about fiber art. And I thought, okay, fiber art. I made some in the past, but I want something new. And so I came across, again, all those remaining paper I always keep on the side, and thought, why not, you know, cutting them in tiny stripes of paper and weave them together. So I found those tiny little looms that I use, and I've done some tiny little pieces of work. And I call it second skin because it's related to our skin and the injuries that we're doing to our skin in our daily work. It can be, you know, working at home as an artist, or as a gardener, or as a chef in a kitchen, and etc. We usually hurt ourselves, hurt our skin without really knowing it, but it definitely leaves some scar. So it's all about scar and healing process. And this is some of the work. And that work was exhibited last month, actually, in November, December, at the Stanley Gallery. It was a beautiful show. I was very pleased to end that really tricky 20 years with that show. And yes, so this is it. Thank you very much for listening to me. I hope I wasn't too long. You've got my website here, so you can Go on the website if you want to receive my newsletter. There's a contact link to subscribe to my newsletter, and you can follow me on my social media, Facebook, Instagram. I just started TikTok and I'm on LinkedIn too. But so you can, apart Twitter, you can find me practically everywhere. And yeah, thank you very much. So I will stop sharing my screen and I will leave Angela.
I just have a quick question for you before you switch over. So like, obviously we have a great art scene in Philadelphia, but Paris is like the center for art. What are some artists that have influenced you from Paris that you've kind of like taken with you in your world travels?
Wow, there's so many artists. I would say that definitely in etching, I think that was my teacher. So there is two guys who were teaching in my old school, and I was still able to meet them, and they were extremely open. They were not, traditional in the way of approaching printmaking. As I said earlier in my talk, printmaking can be extremely traditional, and in Europe, it's definitely not the same here in the US. I guess most of the contemporary printmaking approach who came to Europe, came from the US for sure, and for Great Britain. But in France, for example, if you take the example of the famous Fine Art School of Paris that I wanted to do, I didn't do it because I found it too traditional for me. It's the the etching studio. It's extremely traditional. And if you want to do something a little bit more contemporary, it doesn't work. So definitely my two teachers were amazing. They really opened my mind on and never judge me. And because some, kind of mentor can say, this is the way it works. You have to stick to the technique and this is it. So that definitely that. I was really blessed to grow up in an arty family. My father is an artist and a sculptor. So I grew up visiting museums. I grew up, I was also, as a teenager, sometimes dragged to the exhibition in museum, and I was complaining, but now I'm so grateful and thankful because it definitely shaped my whole vision about contemporary art. So I grew up going to Picasso exhibition. I love Bonnard. I love quite a lot of traditional French artists, and I'm amazed here that you can see most of the European painter in the American Museum. I think we are blessed to have the Barnes Museum here in Philadelphia. I have to say, I could have ended up being in a worse situation. I know Philadelphia for me is great. There's great museum. The art scene is amazing. So, and also after all the countries I've done where there is some art scene, but in Burma, because of the strong military junta, the art scene was totally underground. And it didn't speak a word of Burmese, so it was difficult for me to connect with the art scene. In West Africa, it's a different art scene. In Turkey, it's great, but if you don't speak Turkish, it's nearly impossible to be in contact with people. So being here definitely gave me, like I would say, a fresh air and like a new beginning, I would say. Another step in my career for sure.
Well, I know you want to get into your studio tour. Does anyone have any questions for Agathe before she switches over? Okay.
Okay, cool. So I will just start the process.
Yeah. So we're just going to switch to her phone so she can walk around her studio. And she has a pretty amazing studio, I will say, from seeing it before.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
It's working great. So I will flip over. Let me see. It worked earlier. I want to try to flip over my, perfect. Okay, so here we are.
So I will start by the small corner. So this is my studio. So as I might have said, I've got a studio in the basement of my house, and I'm really lucky because I have quite a big basement, and my basement open on the outside. So it's like having my own little studio. So if I want, I can leave the house, tell everybody that I'm leaving, and I just going back inside the house.
So what neighborhood do you live in Philadelphia?
So I live in Wynwood, so it's just outside of Philadelphia. Wynwood, it's basically just after the city line. So I'm very close to Philadelphia, but west part of Philadelphia. So it's a suburb. Wynwood, it's between Narberth and Ardmore, not far from Ballakenwood. So here you've got some of the work that you saw on my power plant. You've got those paper fabrics. You can see better. There's a remaining piece from Burma. You can see the paper installation work that I was doing. You have a big piece from Burma. So this one, actually, I used to have them floated on frame because I really like the quality of the paper. But when I traveled after Myanmar, it was much more convenient to mount them on canvas. So this one is mounted on canvas. And I've got some small of the herberge carborundum, and I've got extra work. So it's a bit of a patchwork of different series here. And some textiles, some shelves, etc. I have to. So that's where I storage my work. I will just put my light down. I have that all sitting.
I love the red wall.
Yeah, so that room wasn't really part of the studio at the beginning, but this is it. So this is why it was red, but I quite like it. And here you can see some new work I've done last year for a show which unfortunately postponed, but I hope it will happen maybe in, I would say, 2022, hopefully, we'll see. So it's monotype mounted on big canvases, and it's only one single panel, but I've got two others one. So it's a big composition. And let's go further. We've got more paper clothes, and this is the actual place where I print. Things on the wall. So this is the press. So this is my etching press. It's great. It was bought in Holland as a company called Polymetal in Holland, who do very great prints. They are lighter than the original one, but as efficient as an original one, and they are great, really, really nice. And they were quite cheap for me when I bought it. It might be more expensive now. That is one I call my inspiration board. So I like to have one board, one piece of wall on my studio when I just collect things who inspired me. And I've got, I'm working on cutting now some of my prints and see if I can do bigger weaving. Here it's a series that I didn't put on the slideshow, but it's a series of vegetable prints that I started to do during the lockdown. So last year when the lockdown started, I guess I needed a break. I was so overwhelmed and stressed. And I guess there was a lot of people like me in that situation. I had to take a break of what I was doing. And I needed to definitely do something who didn't include too much of I would say, brain work. I don't want to say that in a negative connotation. It's just that I wanted something that when my hand could definitely work without my brain necessary. And I think it was just a way for me to release, the uncertainty of the time, the stress. And during that time, at the beginning of the lockdown, I think the only things I was doing, it was working 2 hours a day, 1 hour in the morning, 1 hour in the afternoon. And I suddenly look at my neighborhood in another way. I usually take my car. I'm not necessarily working in my neighborhood. And because there was, I don't know, nothing else to do, I would say, all the road was shut down. So by walking, I was able to, express out in a way the stress, but also looking at around me. And I decided to pick up some of the weed grass on the side of the sidewalks and work mostly with the non-gracious, I would say, vegetal. So it's not beautiful flowers. It's mostly weeds, weeds plants, bishop weeds or things like that, plants like that. I don't know the English name for those plants, but the one who are not the most nicest one, and just work with them. And I started the series with red. I don't have some called Red Nature, and after a while I switched to blue again. And it's definitely a series I will continue to do. So I started with some smaller pieces, like this one might be 15 by 15 inches. And I just started last September with bigger one. So I will definitely continue. So here I've got working basically table station. Here is where I mix my ink. And sometimes I ink my plate here on in another table. And I've got a great small little press here, which called a typo-proof press, I think in English, that I found in a printing company who was bankrupt in France 25 years ago. And now you can't find those kind of press. They're perfect for relief print. And we've got more work here. So, old series of work. Those are quite new. They're part of the second skin series. I'm still working on them. So this is why they are not framed. And we're back to the studio. So another inspiration wall here when I gather photos of the family, photos from countries abroad, exhibition of different artists that I like, and I keep the invitation on the board. So we can maybe see better of that vue de la vitre, view from the window series. So they're all mounted on 1.5 inches canvases. And we can see a bit of the texture and the layers of acrylic. And that's a series that I finished last year, also at the beginning of the lockdown. I was finishing basically some work, thinking that I had that big show plan, which didn't happen yet, but hopefully it will soon. And here on the table, I just want to show you some plates. So the bare plate of a cardboard on print. So I show you some of the landscape. This is a plate before it's inked. So it's maybe difficult to show you with the phone, but all the superstructure we've got here, it's basically a mix of superstructure and acrylic medium. And it's I don't have any print, I guess, to show you. No, I don't have any of the landscape print. But again, if you go on my website, you can see more. That's one of the plates of the beige. And well, you can't feel it, but you can hear maybe there's a lot of things going on here. And for those who don't know relief print, we have a tiny lino cut here. So it's a linoleum, engraved linoleum. And I use those usually to do some illustration prints. I quite like to do greeting cards. And I have a wood cut. I use a wood cut also to do illustration work. So I usually use plywood. It's harder to engrave wood, I would say. It's the beauty with wood. It gets some. You have the grain of the wood sometimes, so you can play with that. And if you want to know more about my latest series of work, I've made a catalog that you can find of my cloud. So you're welcome to look at my cloud. Again, there's everything on my website. And if you subscribe to my newsletter, you can receive the link shortly. I've got a catalog you can purchase on my website about a retrospective I've done 2 years ago. I've done 20 years as a printmaker at the Third Street Gallery, and you can see a lot of a retrospective of my work here. So I think, I don't know if there's any question. I think I can come back on different view of the studio if you want.
Yeah, I would love, if anyone has any questions for Agathe, please either type them in the chat or go ahead and unmute yourself, or any comments.
I can come back on me.
So I'm wondering, the series you have of the flowers, they remind me of cyanotypes just because of the blue color. And that's like when you it's a special paper that you put in the sun and it makes a print. Did you actually use the plants themselves to make that print, or is that something you like carve?
Yes. No, I use the plant itself. I use the plant itself. So yes, it definitely remembers cyanotypes. Here I am printing onto a Japanese kozo paper. So it's extremely light, and it's great because it's taking a lot of prints. It has the ability to really well take the print. And I'm definitely working with the vegetable who goes under the press. What I'm doing, it's working on the negative and positive at the same time. So I've got, I would say, my own little tricks to do that. But again, it's not only one go under the press, there's superposition here. And what I found really interesting, it's sometimes I've got, I don't know if we can see it, we've got the dye of the flowers print onto the paper. And it was an accident in a way, but that's great. So some of here, definitely the print was fresh. In some other like that one, this one is dry. And I think I've got, yes, I might have passed it quickly. I've got some of the vegetables. I have a whole collection of vegetables here. So you can see them, they're here. So I really love working with those kind of herbs, you know, when I go in the forest, working with the dog, or we can't see them very well because there's no background, but I have, you know, collection of dry plants here. When it's too dry, it's difficult because it breaks under the press. So it's a bit messy. I don't necessarily have a nice result. So there's a kind of, not chemistry, but there's a way of working with it. It can be quite challenging. But I think this is what I like. The fact that sometimes you know what will happen, sometimes you don't really know. So it's interesting. And here we've got what we call the ghost when you work. So it's a remaining ink onto the plate. And it's amazing how detailed sometimes, you know, all the details you've got. That's the beauty of having an etching press. The pressure is so strong. It gives, you know, amazing details. So that's something that I definitely would love to, like, look at that leaves. I really would love to develop things like that. It's really interesting. And that's things you can't do with cyanotype.
Yeah.
Cyanotype is a photographic process. So yeah, I think I will do more. I want to do big one. So I'm a little bit limited with the size of my press, but it's definitely something that I would like to explore.
I mean, your press looks huge. Is that a small press?
It's not. And I think it's maybe 36 by 45, something like that. It's not very big. It's not very, very small. But, you know, it was funny because all the years I was without it, I always thought I had difficulties to leave it. It was a bit like leaving my baby behind. And when we moved here, we found the house and I was able to ship all my studio from a boat to here. I was so excited. I thought that I would receive something huge. And I was telling everybody, it's like a grand piano. And when I received it, I said, it's not as big as I thought, but it's not small. No. But I think, you know, we're always a bit greedy as artists. You always want more. You always want more. But which means bigger price means also harder work. So, you know, I think it's better if it's not too big for me because I will have difficulties to manipulate it anyway. So
yeah. So every time you move, I mean, I guess you just answered my question. You had things in storage and you finally shipped it over. Do you ever have to like purge your studio of all this old work, or do you just kind of save everything and move it with you as you go?
No. So when I the big trauma, I will say, was when I left England to Southeast Asia, because we at that time just left with suitcases. We were not allowed to live with all our goods. So we left everything in the storage, and I left my studio in the storage, and that was difficult. So after from a country and another, it was always like few boxes of things. It's only when we left Turkey for the States that I said to my husband, this is it. I want everything. I don't want to leave things behind.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was too much. I think I reached time when it was no. And also I was still producing. So I wasn't doing necessarily big series of work. And I was really blessed to every time having big shows in each country where I lived. So I was selling a lot. So I didn't add a lot to bring back with me. Mm-hmm. But still, it was important for me to keep my work with me. And actually, this work that you've got, sorry, I have to switch again. The work that you've got here is the work that wasn't totally finished from my Burmese Days series. And when I arrived in Ivory Coast, I continued to work on it. Mm-hmm. So it's this one as a 3-step process, something like that. He has the first, I would say, layer of print made in Myanmar. And after he has the stitching made in West Africa. And basically I mounted when I was here in Philadelphia. So there's some work like that who also travel with me. And I had some smaller ones that I exhibited in Dakar along with those panels. So, no, there's definitely a continuation in the process. So yes. It's only the etching press who stayed aboard because it's basically heavy. It's a bit complicated to move it. So, but when we moved here, we knew it would be for a certain amount of time. So I decided so myself that it would be great to have my studio back.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm very happy with that. It was definitely one of the best decisions I made. Yeah. I could have worked the same way, and I think I was missing. And the funny thing is, when the price came, I was extremely excited, and at the same time, I was scared. I was a bit like, I don't know how to work with it anymore because I had to leave it for 10 years, a little bit more than 10 years. So when it came back to me, I was a bit like, how does it work? But it just took me a couple of months before I figured out that it's like biking, you just bike again, and this is it, you never leave it. Forget it. So
well, thank you so much for showing us around your studio. If anyone has any comments or questions for Agathe, I'll leave it open. All right, well, this was a beautiful presentation. Thank you so much. I love your work. It's very elegant and sophisticated, and I look forward to seeing it in person soon.
Thank you very much, Angela. Thank you very much.
Oh, and actually, just to let everyone know, Agathe is in an upcoming show at the Esther Klein Gallery that's opening in February. It's an Exquisite Corpse, huge collaboration show. But Agathe was in a group of 6 female artists. You have like a crit group that you meet together, and you all collaborated on a series of works that are going to be shown at the Esther Klein Gallery.
Yes. We call the Femme Collective, and we're a group of 6 women artists from my neighborhood, and we try to, last year it was a bit difficult, of course, but we try to meet once a month to basically encourage ourselves, do a small crit group, but we encourage ourselves and share, our passion for art together. And so when we saw your open call for that exquisite course project, I thought that would be a great idea for us to work together on that project. So I'm very happy that we've done it. And I'm looking forward to see the show and to see the other artist project. It will be great. It's awesome. It was a great opportunity for us to connect in that virtual time, when we couldn't gather anymore. So that was yes, definitely a very, very nice idea.
Awesome.
So thank you for that. Thank you for this. Thank you for tonight.
Of course. Thank you everyone for coming.